is Hollywood time, and the story of this man is historical. But it is his history, too, and the history of Hollywood. And Alan Doshna, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm going to ask him, Doshna or Doshna, I've got to make sure, has put it all together in a memoir from the golden years of MGM and the $6 Million Man to now. And it's all about the man who's been there, done that, actor Richard Anderson, and Alan tells his story. And, of course, Derek Zamrak, our pop-off film guy, invited Alan to join us, and, of course, Derek's with us, too. Hi, Alan.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm fine. Hi, Derek.
Hey, how you doing?
Cool. Now, I know, Derek, Richard Anderson is going to join us at a later time,
Right.
but I'm kind of glad you had Alan on, because, Alan, I got to ask you, was this not a fascinating man? How did you put it all together?
Well, Richard likes to use the word grateful a lot, and I've learned to use it more myself because just the various circumstances that came together, and he was very gracious. It started out my doing an interview with him, and he told me how people are always encouraging him to write his autobiography because he was so fascinating, which I could see that he was, and it eventually came together that I offered to actually do that. I'd never written a book before, but it all kind of came together with his involvement and dedication. And
first time for everything, I'll tell you. I know.
So Al, where did you first meet Richard?
It was at an autograph show in Burbank, California. And,
okay.
Now, what's the most surprising thing that you learned about him?
Well, I guess when I first met him, just the way his personality came across, my impression of him was more serious and kind of a get the job done kind of guy, but he had this wonderful sense of humor, kind of whimsical, and I thought, that was.
That proves he's a good actor, right, Derek?
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, it's always actually been there. The more I see his work, but it was just to see it all there at once. Kind of interesting.
How long did it take you to put it all together?
Actually, we started it all together over about 6 years.
Wow.
It kind of began very slowly, and the thing was I was busy with other things, and he was as well, and he just he thought it was kind of amusing that people would want him to do something like this, and his response would always be, when people would say, you ought to write, to do a story about your life, he'd say, well, I'm still living it.
Oh, smart man.
So, and he, so it was sort of, in a way, he didn't really take it that seriously, but over time, he came to see that, he kind of did it as a hobby at first, but then eventually circumstances came together where he decided, well, let's do this.
Go ahead and do it. Hey, Derek, this is, when you think about Richard Anderson, unbelievable number of movies and television series, and people who wouldn't recognize the name, as soon as you see the face, immediate, right?
Right. Well, I think everyone associates him with $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman.
Yep.
I believe he was nominated for a Golden Globe for Bionic Woman, correct?
Right. That was actually an Emmy, but they changed the voting rules, so it actually didn't materialize, but we touched on that briefly.
Okay. But, he did a lot of stuff for the MGM, correct?
Right, yeah. And what was interesting about the thing about his career was that he started out, his success, actually, real major success, didn't start with MGM, although in a certain sense that was more his training ground. But it wasn't until he asked to be released from his contract for Paths of Glory that things really started to take off, and he began to be taken more seriously as an actor, and he got work in just about every TV series of the 60s.
Now, what about... go ahead.
Oh,
Derek.
no, I was saying way back then, the actors were under contract, and they could only work for those studios unless they loaned them out. So it was kind of a different era, whereas now it's like, it's almost like the actors have the power.
It's amazing how we all evolve. But you, Ed, You started with Ed Wood, was your kind of person that you were devoted to, right?
Right. Well, it's interesting how it came together because although I had seen a lot of Richard's TV shows like The Rifleman and Big Valley and Paths of Glory, the thing that really brought him to my attention was the movie Curse of the Faceless Man. And
really?
There was something about that was so unique, and that was kind of the type of movie I preferred. And so looking back, it kind of gave me, I saw him as kind of an actor in those types of movies, in this kind of surreal little universe. But then the more I learned about him, I saw that whatever, skill he had as an actor was what he gained from, like, MGM and the more prestigious films. So it gave me a bigger, broader appreciation for that.
Now, what about you, Alan? What are you doing these days? Obviously, the book is done, but you're an actor, producer, writer. What is it you haven't done?
Right. Well, a little bit. I'm still. There's always stuff that I would like to do. In all of those areas. So as projects come along, it's good to have a number of irons in the fire. So I'm doing a little bit here and there, and I have some articles coming up in the next Film Facts and a couple of film projects. We have a spin-off series of short films that were made by a Russian director that were spin-offs of the Ed Wood films like Plan 9 from Outer Space, and we're hoping to have them released here in the U.S. Towards the end of the year. And still working on it, and a few things like that, but it's kind of a typical Hollywood, independent, Hollywood story. So. Right.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about Ed Wood for a whole half hour.
I know.
Because Ed Wood is one of my favorite directors, and how he, had the passion to make movies, and whatever it took, he made it happen. I have one question about Richard Anderson in his role with Forbidden Planet, because that was a sci-fi movie that really changed sci-fi. So what was his experience on Forbidden Planet?
Well, it was actually the last film in his MGM contract, and it
right.
was something he in the book he goes in some detail about how nobody really expected this to take off the way it did, because it was originally viewed as something that, a type of film, black and white film, that Monogram or someone would do. And then the bosses, the money people, saw rushes of it, and they saw that it was something special, and they put more money into it, and they used their A-budget people to photography and just put them behind it. And
that's one of my favorite movies.
Right.
That and The Day the Earth Stood Still. Those are the two movies I love from the past.
Right. And you have Robbie the Robot. I mean, everybody knows Robbie.
Now, who was the female star in that one? I forget her name.
Anne Francis. She was later Honey West.
And I mean, it was beautiful, just absolutely gorgeous. But it gave you it wasn't crazy stuff at the time. I mean, I'd had nightmares about that electric thing, the monster that was going all over.
Right.
Unbelievable. I mean, you could make up more in your mind by what they did. They didn't need special effects.
Right. And actually, it actually got nominated for an Oscar for special effects that year. I mean, it really changed the industry in terms of, sci-fi and where it was going at the time in 1956. So.
Amazing stuff.
It was kind of a prototype for Star Wars and the other big budget films, but also it was based on a Shakespeare story or play, The Tempest.
Oh, for heaven's sake. See?
Really? Wow, I never heard that.
No respect for poor old Shakespeare. Go ahead and steal it. It's okay.
Everything's been stolen by Shakespeare.
Yeah, that's true. Alan, do you have a website?
Yes, it's alandoshna.com, and still need to tweak it a little bit, but it looks okay.
And the book itself, the memoir from the golden years of MGM and the $6 Million Man to now, where's that available?
Through the Bear Manor Media website, also on Amazon, and can be ordered through Barnes & Noble, and we're kind of trying to expand it.
Right. And I think what's really fun about the book is that it goes from, such a period of time, from the the golden age of Hollywood and MGM to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and it's really a fascinating read because the industry changed so much during that time period.
Right, and one other thing about Richard that I mentioned about his Curse of the Faceless Man, which was really a remake of the 1932 version of The Mummy.
Mm-hmm.
Here he was kind of at the tail end of the classic, Universal type movie cycle, and with Forbidden Planet was at the beginning of the Star Wars cycle. So he's kind of at an interesting point.
He carried it right over, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for being with us today. Keep up the good work. We'll have to have you come back, and we'll talk more about Ed Wood. How's that?
Absolutely, of course.
Love it. Take care. And
Thank you.
Gary, hang in there with me, okay?
Sounds good.